You're listening to a podcast of Master Your Finances with me, Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional. Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. on 1077thebronx.com. Good morning, and welcome back to another edition of Master Your Finances, presented by Certified Wealth Management and Investment. I am Kurt Baker, a certified financial planner professional located in Princeton, New Jersey, and can be located through our website, which is www.cwmi.us, or you can call me directly at 609-716-4700. And this week, we're very happy to have with us Christine Mariano, who is a realtor. She's a businesswoman and single parent, and she's worked in central New Jersey for over 30 years and has come to know and love the area as her home, along the way becoming an active and vital member of the community. She became a realtor to integrate her community knowledge and passion into her career, specializing in residential sales in central New Jersey and Princeton corridor market areas. In her first 6 years of business, she sold over $25 million in real estate and earned numerous awards and recognitions, including New Jersey Realtor Circle of Excellence Sales Awards and Agency Awards. Thanks very much for coming on today, Christine, to talk about real estate. Real estate, to me, is kind of, from a financial planner standpoint, that tends to be the largest assets most people will own. And even if it's not, it's kind of the cornerstone of a lot of things that they have, right? They live in it. It's great. You can live in your asset and have it. So real estate, to me, is near and dear to my heart. I kind of got started that years ago. That's how I got started, is from the real estate side. So how did you get involved in real estate? Everybody kind of has their own story about what kind of drew them into this interesting part of the world.
Right. Well, thank you for inviting me on and sticking with me when I wasn't eager to come on. But I'm glad that we're doing this, and happy to talk about real estate with you. My journey to real estate in terms of being a realtor started, I think it was always a part of what I did. I owned several homes, sold homes on my own when we were ready to upgrade to a new home, and always had it in the back of my head that it was something I would like to do. I had young children. I was a single parent, and it was not a very kid-friendly, young family-friendly type of job. You work nights, you work weekends, right. That type of thing. But it was something that was always there, and then I was doing a little bit of back office work with a friend and colleague who is a realtor. And she recommended that my youngest was going off to college and said, you really should do this. You should get your license, join the team. And I met with Rocky Balsamo, whose team I'm on. Mm-hmm. We had a really good talk about what I was interested in, what my thoughts on real estate would be, and came on their team and it suits me really well. And I think so. I was successful quickly, and just really enjoy the whole process. I always said that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said that for many, many, many years. And I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a psychotherapist, a writer. And honestly, real estate checks all those boxes. It lets me do a little bit of everything. I have to come up with marketing plans to sell people's houses. I have to deal with contracts and the legal side of things. And I have to be a counselor a lot. I have to,
Sure.
It is your biggest financial asset, but it's also, it's the only financial asset that has a lot of emotion tied to it. You buy and sell stock, it's not typically an emotional experience, but when you're buying and selling a home, especially your family home, there's a lot of emotion. So it's different every day, and I've really come to love it.
Well, yeah, you definitely, I happen to agree with that. And a lot of people, one, I think you did something that I'm very big advocate of, is doing what you love. Mm-hmm. And then you because you enjoy it and you kind of connected with the business, you became successful very quickly. So I'm a big believer in going into an area of, especially when you're going to be self-employed, because it is kind of a 24/7 job. Because you're always, if you're not active on the job, you're always kind of thinking about it in the back of your mind. It never really goes away if you're self-employed. And so taking on something like real estate, and as I'm sure you're very aware, it's about 10% of the realtors that tend to be pretty successful at it. So it's a relatively small number that actually can kind of work through that whole process and gain those things. So I know you personally, so I think I know the answer to this question. What do you think qualities you have kind of make you you really connect and get the clients in and have people come in? Because it is an extremely competitive area of business. Some people don't realize, they think, oh, realtor's easy. You just put a sign up and they sell the house and they make all this money.
Right.
And that is not at all what really happens.
I wish it were, but no, not at all. Not at all how it works. It is a very competitive field because you can become licensed. You can take a 2-week class, then do the testing that you need to, and be licensed in less than a month. And so people get attracted to it. It sounds like a very lucrative, compensation. They don't know all the details, but so yeah, there's more realtors than
Sometimes they say there's more realtor state license than driver's licenses. I've
yeah,
heard those terms,
I'm
right?
sure, but I've read
Feels that way
averages.
sometimes.
I've read averages that the average
Yeah.
realtor makes like $20,000 a year, which
right.
is fine, but it's certainly not money that you can live on. And then
Right.
people also think you can do it part-time, and some people do, but I think it's a lot harder to do part-time because it really does take a financial investment. One of the best things that Rocky said to me when I was thinking about becoming a realtor, he said, this is a business. You're self-employed. You have to spend money on marketing, on materials, on promotions, on finding business. Everybody, once you get past the 2 or 3 relatives who are going to help you, let you sell their house, you have to have, where's that next piece of business coming from? And that was really good advice to me. And so I think what sets me apart and is there's a few things, but I think mainly it's my communication. I'm able to meet with clients. I'm very comfortable with people, listening to, gathering information, listening to what their story is. That's so important to figure out, what they're looking for, what's important to them, whether they're selling or buying, and then being able to continually work with them and communicate back with them during the process. Very often, the biggest frustration that I hear if I'm following someone in that they maybe didn't have a good experience with the first sale of their home or buying a home, the realtor didn't keep in touch or didn't get back to them. They didn't really understand what was going on. And I've been trained, and on our team, communication is just vitally important. We just put a lot of information out there. We come armed with a lot of information when we meet with you and continue to adapt and support that as we go. And whether it's following up with emails, texts, phone calls, getting out in front of information and news. Sometimes there's bad news and you don't get the house or, there's an inspection problem or whatever it is. That's the time when the communication becomes really important because you have to be out in front of it and you have to be your client's advocate and work with them. So I think that more than anything is what sets me apart. I'm a people person and that helps, but you really need the communication, I believe.
I have to agree 100%. I think, and I've said this many times, the number one indicator of success is really communication. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us have, we undervalue it a little bit too much. And I think we need to really bring it back in. And those who do really embrace it and try to make that part of the process. And it sounds like from those things you said, you have an actual process where if things happen,
yes,
we make sure there's a response. Sometimes people think communication is you just kind of respond to everything. But it's also, there's a proactive component of that as well, right?
Right. Yeah. When I go in on a listing appointment, if I'm meeting with you to talk to you about selling your home, I've got a 40 or 50 page presentation that I've put together that explains the process, explains my marketing plan for your home, talks to you about the market in general, where you live, a location, right? Location is going to make a difference in terms of how we're going to market your home, get your home sold. There's 3 components when you're selling a home that are so important, and we liken it to a 3-legged stool. Without each of the components being right, the job's not going to work. And the first is marketing, the second is presentation of the home, and the third is price. And all 3 of those things need to really be in sync if your home is going to sell for the best price, if it's going to, you're going to do it in a timely fashion. It's not going to sit out there for 6 months or 9 months. So the communication is the first piece of it. When I come in, you want to know what my marketing plan is. How am I going to get your house sold? What am I going to do? So yeah, there's so much that needs to be planned ahead of time. It's not just, hey, I can talk a lot, which I can, which I can.
No, you're excellent at communicating. And I think, real estate to me is kind of interesting because I think sometimes people, there's an issue, I think, when you try to communicate somebody with directly in a large transaction. And I think sometimes when people try to do this on their own, and you've done this on your own, and I know I've done things on my own too in real estate, and I use like agents because in certain situations, it's sometimes better to have that intermediary to really kind of filter the process a little bit, because they may say the exact same thing, but they're going to communicate that in a way that'll be receptive to the other party.
Right.
And I sometimes think people don't really understand that, because you'll see, as an example, like somebody tries to sell the home on their own. If they're not really experienced in how to do all of this stuff, and some people do it successfully, as we all know,
right.
But others, it'll just sit there forever because they don't know how to market it. They don't really know how to communicate with the other side. And you lose that filter. Even if you do, I think you have to be careful about like handling your own transactions, so to speak. It's tricky.
Absolutely. It is tricky. And I think some people feel that, with the internet, everything is so, you can put something on Zillow, or you can, put something on the web, and people can come and find you more easily than you may have been years ago. So I think it tends to make it seem a little simpler. But in fact, it makes it that much more complicated, because it's a multi-layered process. And as I said, because there's such an emotional component to it, you're not necessarily seeing things clearly in terms of how your home, everybody thinks their home is wonderful, and it is for them. But how it translates to buyers and what they're looking for and what the problems are, and how do we handle one of the first things I do when I'm taking on a new listing is we do some staging. We come in and say, okay, because that's that second component. How are we going to present your home in its best light? And as much as you love your home the way it is, with all your pictures and all your knickknacks and all your, the things that make that house a home, we need to set it up so that the buyer can see themselves in your home.
Right.
So you have to have some that's one of the hardest parts of my job, that I have to say to people, I'm not knocking what your home looks like. It's beautiful. But we need to take out half this furniture. We need to take down the pictures of your kids for the last 20 years. We need to take down maybe some of the, dramatic artifacts or religious artifacts, and because you want to make a neutral setting. You think about going into a model home; they're very neutral. They're very, there's very little clutter. You want people to walk in. You're setting a stage.
Absolutely.
So, and there's so many pieces of it. Even once, whether it's negotiating offers, if you have multiple offers, it's dealing with mortgage brokers and attorneys, inspectors. I have that network. I have people I can recommend to you that I can work with. I know where the pitfalls are. I can keep the transaction moving along. From that initial consultation all the way to closing, a lot of bumps in the road. There's a lot of things that have to happen. And when you've got somebody who's solely got the eyes on that and can guide you and work with your other partners, you'll see when I have a closing, and if I'm putting something on social media, I very often will say, and so many, thanks to my mortgage team, title, and all different people, because we work together to get that sale done, whether you're representing the buyer or the seller.
Absolutely. And the team is really important. We're going to talk about that after the break.
Okay.
You're listening to Master Your Finances. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker here with Christine Mariano, and we're talking about real estate and the process and some of the challenges that we all encounter when we're trying to really sell the largest asset that we have for most of us, or one of the largest for sure, and how there is a lot of technical aspects to it, but there's also the emotional aspect to it. And Christine attributes her success that she came into very quickly because, one, you really liked real estate, and two, you're a good communicator. And just before the break, we were talking about the team, and I'm a big believer in, quote, being a team player.
Yes.
Because we can all be really, really smart, but we can't be smart and know everything about everything, because even if you're really good at this, there's an awful lot of moving parts, especially in something like the real estate world, where you just can't keep up on it all. So you've got to have the right team. You mentioned like the attorney and the broker, the mortgage person, title people.
Right.
You need all of these people to kind of be rowing in the same direction and understand what each other is doing. So, so how did you kind of put your team together, and what do you think makes your team work, so to
Well,
speak?
I don't have a set team. I work with in the business that I'm in. I need to work with several different mortgage professionals,
They have a
several
bench.
different
You have a good bench.
absolutely. Several different attorneys, title companies,
Yeah.
and sometimes a client comes and they have their own. They need a recommendation, or
Sure.
they have their own people in place. So and with the company, the broker that I work for, Wydell, we have a mortgage company, Princeton Mortgage, and we have a title company, Princeton Assurance. Certainly, I like to work with them as well. I'm not obligated to, and as I tell my client, if I'm recommending anybody, I recommend, whether it's my mortgage, our in-house mortgage or in-house title, or others that I work with, it's because they do a good job. There's no additional compensation or anything like that. But I want to make I want to get to the closing table.
Right.
So I recommend people that I know are going to do a good job, that are going to communicate like I do, and that they're the added incentive for me when I'm working with a team and how it helps my client is during that process. We're in that mortgage process. There's a bump in the road. There's a problem. Something's going on. I can pick up the phone and call one of my teammates, one of the colleagues that I've worked with, and say, "Hey, what's going on? So and so's loan isn't, it seems to be stalled. Is there a problem? What's the problem with the title?" Or we work with the attorney and say, we've got an issue maybe over inspection, and we're trying to work things out. So the other realtor and I go back to our respective clients, try to soften the edges, come back, and then maybe can make a recommendation to the attorneys to say, "Hey, we think this is how it might work out." They make sure everybody's protected legally, and it all works out. So we're all, we all work together. I say we're all rowing together. But one of the things that I think is important that I do, and again, trained by my real estate team, I know when to stay in my lane. I'm a person that I feel like I can, master of all, jack of all trades kind of
Right,
thing, right?
right. Oh, sure.
I feel like I can do a little bit of everything, and I know a little bit about a lot of things. But it's really important that when I work with my clients, I may give them a little bit of direction or advice about mortgage or about title or based on my experience, but I very quickly say, but I'm not the mortgage professional.
Right.
I'm not the title professional. You need to, check that. You need to, because that's what's important. I sell real estate. I don't sell mortgages. And it's important to have a good professional team that supports that supports me and my clients. So, working together is great, but knowing where the lines are drawn and, I don't offer legal advice. I may have an opinion about, hey, you might be able to take this off on your taxes. Call your accountant or call your financial planner and see how this plays out. I think that's important too.
Oh, I agree. So it's good, and I think you pointed out something. It was even if you have a specialty, especially when dealing with a real estate transaction, it's good to know enough about the other pieces of the puzzle to know when to refer out and say, hey, I see something here. Maybe you should dig a little bit deeper and have a deeper conversation regarding this particular issue. So, and sometimes, I've seen, I've been in the real estate world myself for many years, and I think you point out a really good attribute is sometimes people be a little overbearing and they'll kind of move in and start trying to do other pieces of the transaction,
Right.
and they're actually disrupting it because they're making it maybe a small problem, a bigger problem when it doesn't need to be. If you would just allow the people, or at least communicate with the professionals, to say, hey, where are things? Let's just make sure it's all happening.
Right.
And I know a lot of times things will get referred back to the realtor because a lot of it is transaction or relationship oriented as far as what maybe has to be adjusted a little bit, either restructure the transaction a little bit, or maybe the properties have an issue. And I like your little term as you go back and you soften the edges. I kind of like that because that's really what you're trying to do, because you're all really trying to get to the end of the day.
Exactly.
And you're really, because your buyer really wants the house and your seller really wants to sell it. And so when you get involved in these things that can be a little bit disruptive, everybody still has the same goal in mind. The question is who's going to bend a little bit, to kind of make all this work.
Right.
And that's a little tricky sometimes, I think.
Yeah, it can be, and you want to make sure when you're working with your client that they understand that you're advocating for them, and that you have their best interest in mind. We are all trying to get to the closing table, but not at anyone's expense or anything like that.
Right.
And to be able to take that emotion out of a situation and say, listen, your buyer's asking for this, and you can say, here's your options. If you say no, this is where we're going. If you say yes, this is where we're going. But maybe there's a third option that we can kind of meet in the middle. And again, often I have really good relationships with other realtors. Yes, we're competitors, but we work together to get deals done. So I have great relationships with other realtors, and we can speak frankly with each other and say, look, what's the bottom line here? How are we going to help our clients? And we're both, because as part of my licensing, I have a fiduciary responsibility to both sides in the transaction. I can't, if I have information, I can't withhold it from the buyer. If I'm the seller's agent, I can't withhold it.
Right.
And, I have to be frank. I have to be forthcoming. And I have a responsibility to both sides in the transaction, even if I'm only representing one of those sides. So most of the, and honestly, most of the time, deals work out pretty well.
Right.
There are times, obviously, the more, the more layers there are. If there's home sale contingencies, I've got to sell my house to buy your house, and then my buyer is selling their, sometimes
Get
you
that
go,
domino.
oh my gosh, yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
you're going 3, 4, 5
Right.
layers back, and if the guy at the end of the line loses his mortgage, then,
Right.
everything starts to fall apart. And those are the times when really that whole counselor part of me has to
Right.
has to step up and say, okay, we're keeping everybody calm. We're going to deal with this. If there's a problem with, let's say, a mortgage where the buyer finds out his mortgage company has an issue, I might be able to move him to another mortgage person who
Right.
has more experience dealing with that and says, okay, no problem. We can keep this on track. We can keep it going. You're just really trying to keep all the balls up in the air.
I agree with that. Yeah. So it gets complicated. One thing that I've noticed throughout the years is sometimes, and I wonder how you work with this. I know something could be a challenge when your side is all working really well, but you still have to communicate with the other side, and maybe they're not quite in arranged the way you would hope they'd be arranged. Maybe the communication isn't quite so well. So what are some of the challenges you found as far as that part of the transaction goes, and how do you kind of try to work with it? Because that could be really tough. I know.
Yeah. There are people, all walks of, realtors, we're all different kind of people. And, just as in every facet of business, you're going to come upon somebody that maybe you don't click with. You have very different styles. Sometimes, you might have a realtor on the other side, or a buyer or seller on the other side who's abrasive. That's, it gets challenging. And as with any profession, you've got to stay professional. You've got to stay above the fray and not sort of get pulled into it. And I think equally as important, if I'm having frustration with the other realtor, with the other side, I can't let that filter down to my client.
Right.
I don't need to make that their problem. Not that I'm keeping things from them or anything, but there's, in many instances, that just muddies the water, and they don't need to get pulled into that, because that just adds additional stress and anxiety to an already very stressful situation.
Right.
Moving is right up there with like death and divorce and catastrophic things, right? It's bad.
That's why I don't move.
Yeah.
I don't want to move.
Yeah, I had a major move 5 years ago. I downsized from my house in South Brunswick to a townhome in Robbinsville, and it was a major change. I had lived in that home for 15 years, and went from a big house to a smaller house, and I am a better realtor because of it, because I experienced what my clients go through. It's not easy. There's a lot going on when you're moving. So the last thing you need is to hear your realtor's stress. I need to keep that away from my client if I'm having that with the other side. So
Right. That just points out how stressful it is, because those of us that have been related into the industry for a while, even when you go through the transaction for yourself, and
Yeah.
all the parts,
Yeah.
right? You know what's going to happen and what the possibilities are, because you've seen it, even because right? So it's kind of like
just the physical aspect of moving,
Right.
and then, like I said, you add the layer in of maybe it was your children's home, or maybe you're selling your parents' home and they've moved on, or there's some, I work with people in happy circumstances and unhappy circumstances. And even I tell people who are in unhappy circumstances and who are feeling bad about moving, whether it's because of a divorce or because of other unforeseen circumstance, job loss, something. I tell people, even people who are happy moving because they're buying a bigger house or they're moving to their vacation home, or it's still stressful. It's just, there's a lot to do. There's those uncertainties. It's balancing everything and timing, especially if you're selling one house and buying another, and it all has to time out equally. What do I do with all this stuff? Do I want half this stuff? Can I, there's just a lot to it. And
there certainly is. We're going to talk about a lot more of that in a few minutes.
Okay.
You've been listening to Master Your Finances, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finances. I am Kurtis Baker here with Christine Mariano. We're talking about real estate, and we're kind of going through the process of the importance of the different team members and how they kind of work together. And you have kind of like a bench. So you've got a number of people that are good at every single area, which is really key. And you need some flexibility in there because I know in my business I do the same thing. And you want to, because certain situations, it's not just the expertise, it's the personality, right?
100%.
So you want to connect the personality and the expertise, and then you're going to have a better outcome as far as your clients are concerned. So whenever I refer out, I'm always thinking about, are they going to get along? Are they going to really meet the needs and things like that? So it sounds like you got a really great team put together. And one of the things we were talking about just before the break is that there's a lot more to the real estate transaction than just signing the deed over and accepting the keys.
Right.
Right. So kind of you want to go through some of those things that really kind of get us all stressed out and how you help the clients kind of manage through that process of actually moving, especially when you're upsizing and downsizing is really, to me, that's the hardest one. It's tricky. As you get older, you have to get rid of a lot of this stuff that your kids probably don't really want.
Right. Right.
So
exactly.
You think they do, but they don't really.
No. And, I advise people, especially because a lot of my friends are in the same boat in terms of downsizing. All our kids are, grown, graduating college and, out of the house. And so now you've got that big house. What do you do? And I encourage any of my friends or clients, you start the process long before you're ready to put the for sale sign in the front lawn. Absolutely, decluttering, getting rid of things, having, I do a lot of consultations with people where they'll say, hey, we're hoping next year to put the house on the market. Can you come in? Can you talk to us about, where we might be in the market, what we could do, what might make sense to get the house ready to sell? All of that is just good pre-planning. It's just good that so when you are ready to put the house on the market, you're putting your best foot forward. So I may meet with someone and we'll come in, we'll look at the house. I can give them a general idea at that point in the market about where their house might fit, what they might sell for, with the understanding that a year from now it could be a very different market. And that's very true that, what happened this year. This year's market is very different from last year's. But then, we're going to walk around, we're going to talk about, some of the things they might do to stage the home, to, the obvious decluttering and fixing things that are broken, that type of thing. And then also, a lot of times what will happen is a person will ask me, well, should I redo this bathroom? Should I replace? And I can give them a little bit of advice about that. We have a lot of staging, a lot of experienced stagers on our team. I'm actually in the process of getting some additional certifications in that area as well. That, there are things that make sense to do, and there are things that, it's not a dollar for dollar. I'm not going to spend $10,000 in a bathroom and say, well, now I can increase my list price by $10,000.
Some people think that.
No, not at all. Not at all. There's, I can share information about, things that I've gotten over the years that appraisers have shared in terms of what things are valued. And it's surprising how low the numbers are in terms of what it adds to an appraisal when you have a finished basement or when you have an extra bathroom. They're, it's there, but it's not just, hey, we're going to paint and now we're going to add $5,000 to the cost of the house. That's what happened in 2005, 6, 7, where, people were buying houses on Friday and selling them the next week and putting an extra 20 grand on the list and doing it. It was crazy.
Right.
It's a lot more. The buyers are very savvy right now. There's a lot of information out there. So, I can share that, and I recommend to people that, you start thinking about that, a good 6 months in advance or a year in advance. And I'm happy to work with you and meet with you along the way and time when we want to get that house on the market. Obviously, everybody knows, spring market is the best time into the summer, but there's a fall market also. And the reality is homes sell 12 months out of the year. They just,
Right.
for different reasons. So all of that is important on the sell side and, getting that prep done. On the buy side, the number one thing you want to do is find out where you sit in terms of a mortgage. Talk to someone, find out where what your credit looks like. I mean, we can all do the credit scores and all that, but sitting down with a professional who can say to you, okay, here's your credit score. You can increase it by X points if we clean up these accounts, or if you do this or that, or maybe discover that you had a delinquency that you didn't know about. So much about rates and everything is tied to what that credit score is. Gives you an idea of where you're going to sit. And you in your head, if you have in your head, you want a $400,000 home, and you find out, well, you really can't afford that because of those student loans that you have, or maybe you get a happy surprise that you can afford more. Gives you a guideline to work with. It lets you plan and say, okay, I need to save some money for a down payment. It helps dispel a lot of the myths about how much money you need. Some people think you need 20% down to buy a home. You obviously don't. And what that all means. So the first thing I, recommend to people is sitting down, with a mortgage professional, getting that squared away, and then communicating to me about, okay, we have a buyer's consultation. What are you looking for? What are the areas? What are you looking for in terms of, the type of house, et cetera? And very often we start with a pretty wide net, and then as the process goes on, it narrows, and we fine tune that search to, and sometimes we're looking at, we may look for a month or two at listings before we decide we're ready to go out.
Mm-hmm.
And whether clients are, going to open houses or different things. But there's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on in terms of, buying or selling.
Oh, I happen to agree with that 100%. And I know sometimes people preemptively, I know when they're getting their house ready to sell, we're going to go redo all these things. Like we're going to put in tile floors everywhere, or wood floors. And I hear this comment when people are putting, we just redid all the flooring in the house, or or decorated the house.
Right.
And as you know, a lot of that's taste. You got to be really careful about doing things that you may think are fantastic. Your next buyer may hate tile floors and want to put carpet in.
Right.
So you have to be really careful about what types of upgrades or where you spend your money. Because, as you said, if you go to a model home, they're very, very generic, and they're kind of easy to modify. They're kind of easy to put your own personality on it.
Yeah. The other thing that, we're seeing more and more investors in the market who are buying homes, flipping them, right? Making the renovations and putting them on the market. And what you're seeing there is very interesting because you can see the difference in quality. Some people, especially this, we were talking during the break about, buying houses and redoing them, right? You can tell when you've got somebody who's good at what they do and somebody who just thinks, hey, I'm going to slap a coat of paint and I'm going to put a Band-Aid on this and it's all going to look great and then I'm going to make money. And again, buyers are savvy. It's, you want to make sure that if you are making an improvement, that you're not just saying, okay, I've got to get my house painted. So A, I can do it myself. B, I can hire contractor A, and C, I can hire contractor B. Well, doing it yourself might be great, but make sure you're a good painter.
Right.
Make sure it looks good, because nothing looks worse than a bad paint job. Or if you think you can do floors, but the seams are crooked and there's gaps, that's worse than the old floor. You're better off. And just trying to figure out. And again, that's a part of that team. I have contractors I work with, plumbers, electricians, roofers, masons, that I can have come in and talk to you about what you can do, because you want the work done well. You want to pay a reasonable price, and we have to come up and say, okay, if you spend $5,000 on paint, on new carpet, on this and that, how much more can we sell your house for? Or maybe it just makes it that much more saleable, so we're going to sell it in a month, maybe for the same price, but you're not going to have to carry it for 6 more months.
Yeah, that's the part I was thinking of. Because sometimes people think it's not really, it's getting it really in a position where somebody's like, I can see myself in the home. Because
Right.
most people come in and they normally, even if you have generic paint, they're going to say, well, we're going to repaint that room,
Right.
pink or something. Because they're
Right.
going to have certain personalities they're going to put on. Even if the house is fine. So as long as you kind of make it nice,
Right.
I think most people moving into a home, at least they should have
Right.
a budget to put in the things that they want
Right.
within a relatively short period of time, because you do want to put your own
Right.
flavor
But I
on the
mean,
home.
sometimes it's a case of, okay, we've just painted the house a neutral color and we've got some neutral carpeting in here, but it's clean and it's
Right.
not torn. And the buyer says, okay, that neutral paint isn't my cup of tea, but it's clean and I don't have to change it 5 minutes after I move in
Correct.
or
They can
before
live
I
with it.
move in. I can live with it for a
Right.
month or 6 months or
Right.
so. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's about the sellability and not necessarily that you're going to get more money, but number one, you're going to be able to sell it.
Right.
You can have, you can have a house. You can decide and have all sorts of charts and graphs and say this house should be worth X. But a house is worth what a buyer is willing to pay and a bank is willing to finance.
True.
That's it. So even if you find somebody who's got the same taste you do and wants to pay you overpriced for your house, which that doesn't happen much anymore.
Right.
The bank's going to send an appraiser in and is going to say, what's this house worth? And if you've over improved it, if you've put a $100,000 kitchen in a $200,000 house,
Right.
the house is still going to be worth $200,000. They're not going to say, oh, you put $100,000 into this kitchen, so now it's worth $300,000. If every other house on the street has sold for $200,000, your house may be worth $210,000, but you're not going to get that $100,000 back. So you have to make appropriate improvements
Yeah.
to the home
And
as well.
that's the improve versus move
Yes,
analysis.
love
And
it
what
or
we-
list it.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that when we come back in just a few minutes. You're listening to Master Your Finances. Welcome back. You're listening to Master Your Finance. I'm Kurt Baker, certified financial planner professional, here with Christine Mariano, realtor with Wydell, and we're talking about right before the break is doing like improvements and doing appropriate improvements. And I know sometimes every once in a while you go to see that one house in the neighborhood, and I actually bought one of these once. I was on the other end after they over improved, and you're like, the house is like twice the size. They bumped it out, they bumped it up, they bumped it back, they bumped it this way, and
Right.
it's like 3 times the square footage of everybody else. You go, well, it's 3 times the price. And it just doesn't quite work out that way. So, one, when people do these improvements, they have to understand what it's really going to do to the value and then make that analysis. They really should do an analysis. Should I do all these improvements or should I just like move to another location sometimes, right? So you want to be careful about your finance, unless for some other reason you want to be there.
Right,
Right.
right. And that's something else that a realtor brings to the table that, I meet with people who say, I had a call right before I came here today. A friend from South Brunswick who called and said, we're ready. We think we're ready to downsize. It'll probably be another year, but we kind of want to get an idea of what the house is worth, and then maybe this is where we want to go after that. So, can we meet and talk about that? Kind of get the process started. So, yeah, absolutely. So, I'm going to come in and meet with them and give them an idea of what their house will sell for. So then they can say, okay, I'm going to take X out of the house. And then moving forward, do I want to get a mortgage? What am I doing buying? But, to get back to that improvement situation, there's always a situation where you've got a really big house in a small neighborhood, smaller homes, or you've got, the house that's completely over improved. And part of what I have to do, or what I do when I come in, is I will do a market analysis, and I'll say to you, okay, this is, here's your home. These are the 3 or 4 comparable homes to you. I try to find one that's a little smaller, one that's a little bigger, one that's just right.
Right.
And then say,
3 little
now-
bears.
Yeah. And how does it all compare?
Right.
And because that's what an appraiser does. And again, I'm not an appraiser, but I can do that initial, that superficial kind of look and say,
Right.
they've got 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. You've got that. Although they have a finished basement, so this is going to add here. You've got this. This is going to add here. Your brand new kitchen's going to add, $5,000 or $10,000 in value over this guy who just has a yucky kitchen. You spent $50,000 on it.
Right.
It doesn't translate.
Right.
But yeah, at least I can try to give you some guidelines so that, because again, that third piece of that stool is price. We can
Right.
do the best marketing. We can have the home set that it looks like a model home when you walk in it and it's perfectly presented and staged. But if the price is wrong, the house isn't going to sell.
Right.
People, the buyers, as I said, are smart. They know that the house down the street sold for $500,000, and that one sold for $510,000, and that one sold for $490,000, and now you want to put your house on the market for $600,000. Why? So if the price is wrong, the house is going to sit. And there's been studies that a lower priced home actually will sell for more than the home that's higher that has to reduce down. That over time, and
Right.
I don't have the statistics in my head, but starting lower will end up in a higher sale price than starting at that overinflated number and having to come down.
Oh, I have to agree with that because I know when I would do searches for real estate and you see these ranges, and if you had one that was priced way out of market, you basically come back and say, what's wrong with the seller?
Right.
Do I really want to deal with this person who thinks
Right.
their house is worth literally 10% more than what it's really worth?
Right.
And so if it sits there, and then when they start bringing it down, it shows days on market, and you're
Right.
like, wow. So
And
you
then,
have to.
yeah, ideally, you don't want to have to reduce the price, because when you reduce the price,
Right.
it's like blood in the water. It's like, okay, what's happening?
What's going
wrong
on?
with this picture? Why
Yeah.
doesn't anybody else want this house?
Psychological part, right?
Exactly. And what
Psychology
is
comes
the
in.
part like where you come in and you get 5 offers in a weekend because
Right.
everybody wants the house because it's a great house, and then you end up selling it over list.
Right.
It just makes sense. I mean, I have to educate my buyers also that you'll come in and a home is listed at 500,000 and the person says, well, I want to offer 450, and I'll say, well, but the comparables are here for X, Y, and Z, but isn't it 10? Don't you list it 10%
Oh, they think
over?
they know. Right.
No, when I get a listing, and sometimes I get an appraiser to come in if it's a hard to comp house and it's a hard home to say, okay, this is what it's worth. We'll hire an appraiser to come in and give us that number, and we'll list it within 2%, 3% over that price. A little room for negotiation, but we're not slapping 10% on it. That's crazy. If it's
Right.
if a home is appraised at 500, we're not listing it for more than 510, 515, that type of thing, because there needs to be that's the margin today. It's not.
And you bring up, and I was going to say that, you bring up the interesting point. So there's the list price, there's sales prices, and then there's that differential. And you have to know what market you're
Yeah.
in, because some markets are different. And as you
Right.
know, when you're in a really robust seller's market, these numbers will flip on you, where people
Absolutely.
are bidding up the price of the houses. So
Yeah.
if you don't understand the dynamics of what's actually going on in the market today,
Right.
you can be outside of the norm, so to speak. And when
Right.
people are doing that analysis, they're going to kind of shy away from the transaction because they're not sure what's wrong. They'll just go to the other houses first. They may come to your house
Right.
eventually,
Well,
if you're
even
kind of
in-
last in line.
Even in the same market and just in different price points, right? I
Right.
mean, this summer the market of homes in the $300,000 to $400,000 range or below, sold very quickly. If they were priced right and staged right, if everything was done right, they moved, very quickly. As you got into the higher priced homes, 500, 600 and above, we saw a lot of hesitancy. We saw, homes were not selling in a weekend that normally would sell in a weekend. And some of that, I think, was due to the changes with the SALT tax, the new tax law that
Right.
limits your state and local income tax that you can deduct, that now the properties that are $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 properties that have $15,000 to $20,000 in real estate taxes,
Right.
people are now saying, well, I can't write all that off. What does that mean? And they need to go through a couple of tax cycles to realize how that's all going to play out.
Right.
And even just in our area, immigration, the immigration situation where there's a slowdown in H-1B visas, people who are here on work visas.
Right.
We have a lot of people in our community in the Princeton, general Princeton area, Mercer County, that are here on work visas. Used to be sort of a rubber stamp. That's slowing down. There's not the same confidence that will happen. So now, of course, are you going to go out and, plunk down, $500,000 or $1 million on a home when you're not 100% sure that you're going to be employed beyond the 2 years that you're here now? So there's a lot of complicated factors that you have to take into account. And that's what your realtor does.
Right. I agree. You kind of keep the pulse of the market going on.
You have to. You have to.
And so what do you see like going on? Like you talked about a little bit. So where do you kind of see the market headed at the moment? What are we seeing out there? I know rates are coming down.
Rates are down.
Which is a
that's
positive
great.
side, but
Yep.
I know other things are kind of slowing up a little bit.
Well,
Or what are you
think-
seeing out there as far as
I
locally?
think it seems to be. I mean, it's it's still with the rates being as low as they are, it's still an excellent time
Right.
to be in the market. And real estate has always been a over time such a great investment. And so, from what I hear, the experts that I listen to and what I'm seeing generally in the market, I think we're not looking at it's becoming a more neutral market. We're not seeing a seller's market. Certain price points we are. We're not seeing a seller's market. We're seeing more of a flattening and maybe even a little tilt toward a buyer's market. We'll see what we'll see. I think, and anytime you're in an election year, and obviously there's a lot going on now with a lot of uncertainty, and I think that'll reflect itself a little bit in the real estate market as well. So I think we may be seeing sort of more of the same into next year, and that's at least what I'm hearing from some of the experts that I listen to, the workshops that I go to,
Right.
to try to get a pulse, and even just on my team, what we talk about and what we're seeing. We're seeing, it just becomes more important to price the home right, to do all the things you have to do in a wild market or a robust market. You can kind of cut corners because
Right.
everybody's
It's gonna sell anyway.
It's going to sell anyway.
Right.
But as things get more defined, it becomes more important to get the fundamentals, get those building blocks right.
No, I agree. That's kind of what I'm seeing is real estate is kind of, as an overall investment, seems to be kind of keeping pace with
Yeah,
everything else.
yes.
It's not really going to, knock anybody's socks off, but also
No.
it doesn't look like it's going to really it's just going to kind of, at least in our area, that's what we're seeing as far as from my perspective.
Right.
And it's a good investment for the right situation.
Agreed.
But you just don't do it just for that return. You do it because you have all the other pieces in
Right.
there that
Right.
make sense as well. So it
And
kind of fits in the middle.
It's just a key component to just your personal wealth. Everything, it's people who own property typically have a higher net worth than people who don't.
Yeah, got it. So we're good. So, Christine, I really appreciate you coming on today, talking about the market, talking about
Thank
how we're
you.
doing. It's been fantastic. You've been listening to Master Your Finance. I'm here with Christine Mariano from Wydell, and she gave us a great synopsis of what's going on out there. You can reach us by going to our website and subscribing at masteryourfinances.us. And remember that together,